Hey everyone, Gaijin Goombah here. I guess he's not back yet, but I'm freaking back! Oh man, I cannot even begin to tell you how much better I feel. I badly needed that month off in September. I'm back, I'm feeling fresh, I'm ready to get some videos done. I got a lot of great ideas, and guess what else is coming back this month? Open tourism to Japan, baby! Oh man, visa-free entry back into Japan. I am so freaking stoked. No entry cap, no requirement of those stupid overpriced travel packages, and no more babysitting. We can actually travel where we want in the country, and it feels so good. And of course, yeah, I'm very much wanting this to happen. It's been 2 very long years since I've been able to see all of my friends, and there's a lot of friends I've been missing. Doing any on-site research, which I still really want to continue to make better content here, and just to get a decent feel of what Japan's been up to, you know? Every single time I go back, I always try to pay attention to what's going on and bring that information back to better educate myself before I make any of these videos. But counter to what you all might be thinking, I'm actually not in any rush to get back to Japan as of this moment. I'm not going to be rushing back on October 11th to get back into Japan. In fact, I'm probably not going to be back into Japan until about spring of 2023. And again, I know that may sound completely strange coming from this guy of all people, but I wanted to spend this video kind of explaining why I'm doing that and to kind of share all of the different forewarnings and things that I've been sensing over the last 2 years. Okay, let's start with the small minute things really quick. Let's say you actually do go back ASAP to Japan either in October, November, December. It's gonna be cold. And I know what you're thinking, of course it's gonna be cold, Gaijin. It's in freaking winter. What else do you expect? It's not like we're going to the freaking equator or something. Well, here's the thing. Japan does not have central heating and cooling. I know I've said that 100 times here on 100 different videos between here and then that second channel, but I really do have to emphasize, it's going to be cold in Japan and you may not have that much levity from it. In fact, do you know what these are? Go ahead, guess. Do you know what these are? These are thermal underwear, and when it comes to winters in Japan, you're gonna want these. Now, granted, I might be over-exaggerating a couple things here and there, because I lived out in the Inaka where there was even less modernization, but these things freaking saved my life, and every single time I think about going back to Japan in the winter, I feel like I need these, cause it's kind of hard to stay warm. I mean, shoot, back in the place that I used to live, the only source of heat that I had was a freaking air conditioning unit in the top corner of my main room. I was only lucky enough that actually blew into my bedroom so I could actually sleep comfortably. But aside from that, the best thing you're gonna find are kerosene heaters. And I don't know about all of you, but ever since I've been introduced to that as a concept, it has done nothing but driven my allergies crazy. So if you're gonna come to Japan, ASAP, you're gonna want to bundle up really hard. Okay, let's get into the actual meat of the matter here. Now, I don't know how many people are gonna be bum rushing Japan come October 11th, but I do know there's been a lot of anticipation for a lot of people to show up, and Japan's been a real big buzz about trying to accommodate as many people as possible. And there's actually a lot of good reasons why people would want to go be a tourist in Japan in October of 2022. The yen is at an all-time decades low. I think it's been the lowest it's been in 30 years. What was it? It's like $1 US to about 145 yen. That's like 1.5 times the amount, and that's insane. So that's gonna give us way more money to work with in order to travel and stay and get food and souvenirs and all this stuff, and Japan very much wants this. In fact, Japan wants it so much so that the country topped the World Economic Forum's Travel Tourism Development Index earlier last year, which basically means Japan is the #1 country right now for having conditions needed for a really big booming bounce back when it comes to tourism. And I've seen article after article about all these different companies, shops, and destinations that are bracing for the impact of a massive influx of tourists. But despite all of this, there are a lot of people in the tourism industry in Japan who actually aren't really sure if people are going to be coming back in droves. To quote the Japan Times, people are still skeptical, said Shinichi Shimoda, president of the Niseko Resort Tourist Association. They don't know if foreign tourists are really going to come, but even if they did, they can't secure enough workers in time. And that's something that I really wanted to bring up that not a lot of people are really talking about all that much. Is Japan ready? And I'm not talking about COVID or anything like that. I'm just talking about a massive influx of people, and especially a massive influx of tourism. Is Japan ready? I don't think it is. And I'll get to that in a minute, but something I really want to highlight, I not too long ago got done talking with Shogo over on his Instagram Live as we meet up every month or so, talking about this very thing. And Shogo himself said that Japan really isn't ready. Citing one of his reasons for that was that people haven't really been speaking English for about 2 or 3 years now. And that may sound ludicrous, that may sound really crazy for a lot of you, but honestly, after 2 years of very little Japanese use on my end, I can only feel my skill become what in Japanese you would say, heta ni narichatta. And the other thing that he followed up with is that a lot of people in Japan haven't really had to deal with any foreigners or deal with an influx of people from the outside who aren't living under the system in Japan. Have a look at my Why We're So Alone in Japan video if you want to better understand what I'm talking about when I say the system and how it's completely integrated in every facet of Japanese life. But the idea behind the whole thing with the system is that people in Japan already have an expectation of cause and effect. If you do blank, expect blank. If you're going to blank, bring blank, or I don't want to get into it in this particular video because I'll be talking about it for an hour, but I've done a video on it. Like I said, I know Shogo's done videos on it. I'll try to put links up here or in the description as I can find them, but it's very important. And I'll say this as someone on the foreigner side of things, a massive influx of foreign travelers are probably gonna get bogged down when they get into the country because of these brand new systems of regulation that Japan's gonna be using to make sure that everybody is, well, COVID-free and healthy when they enter the country. I mean, the dividing of the blue, yellow, and red countries really will help speed things along, but I know when it comes to Japan and new procedures, things are going to be very slow to avoid any potential risk whatsoever. Now, that's not necessarily going to be a problem for people in Japan because they're used to that kind of thing. The problem is going to be more specifically with us, particularly US tourists that are going to be going into Japan. Because the one thing that I've learned doing all of this cross-cultural study between the US and Japan for the last 20 some odd years is that the one thing that is going to annoy a red-blooded American more than anything else is wasting their time. And seriously, folks, I challenge you to tell me that I'm wrong. I want you to think back to every example of the greatest annoyances that we understand. The DMV, waiting half a day at a doctor's office in order to get a procedure done or even just a checkup. Delayed flights, late fast food. I've seen people lose their absolute crap over the smallest, dumbest things because it was just late. In fact, one of the times I was trying to fly back home, actually no, it was the time I was flying back home, leaving Japan, leaving the jet program, I remember that my domestic flight was about a half hour late. I didn't care. I was finally on US soil and I was ready to get back home, but man, there were so many freaking Karens and Kevins and all these other just overly grouchy, gripey people who were just whining about their time being, a half hour of time being wasted. I cannot help but think this is probably gonna happen when it comes to re-entry. There's gonna be a big influx of foreign tourists. They're not really going to know the system that well, and I don't mean the system, I mean this new system of entry, and it's going to frustrate literally everyone. Now, if that was the only issue, if foreign tourism was going to be the only issue when it comes to this whole thing going on October 11th, I think I'd be pretty okay with it. But that's not the only thing that's happening on October 11th, because Japan is pushing for high amounts of domestic tourism and travel from October 11th through December. Let me quote another Japan Times article here. Japan will run a new domestic tourism subsidy program from October 11th to late December as part of efforts to spur domestic tourism and revive the coronavirus hit economy, Tourist Minister Tetsuo Saito said Monday. The national travel discount will provide the equivalent of up to 11,000 yen, up to $77 US dollars, in discounts and coupons per traveler per day, which can be used for shopping, meals, and accommodation expenses. So let me break this down in case this kind of went over your head. during October 11th to the end of the year, there is not only going to be this massive push for foreigners to come in to tour Japan, to act as tourists in Japan, but the government, or at least a lot of these travel agencies anyway, I still don't have the complete details on it, are pushing for domestic travel. You are going to have a massive influx of domestic travel and foreign travel. And I... This isn't even about COVID anymore. I'm actually terrified that Japan is going to be personally as well as professionally completely overwhelmed. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of people who aren't really sure if there's going to be a big influx of tourism on the foreign side of things, so they haven't really prepped that hard for it. Going back to the article, it was stated that they didn't necessarily have the staff to accommodate everyone. So now we're just going to be hit with a double whammy of foreign and domestic tourism. Now, why is this a problem? Well, let's go back to Kyoto for a hot second here. Do y'all remember back in 2019 what was going on in Kyoto at the time? Yeah, 2 years prior to the COVID isolation period, a lot of Japan, especially traditional Japan, was really livid about over-tourism, or tourism pollution as they called it. And this was an especially large problem in Kyoto. After 2 years and a lot of people wanting back in, I could honestly see that problem happening again. You're not only going to have a lot of domestic travelers going to Kyoto to see the sights, but you're going to see a whole heck of a lot of foreign tourists, because Kyoto is probably the biggest site that people are going to want to go to when it comes to regular tourism. I know that Tokyo is a really big thing. I know that Osaka is a really big thing. I know that Hokkaido. I know there are other places. But honestly, when it comes to raw tourism, what's advertised the most? Tokyo? Maybe, debatably, but every single time I see advertisements for traveling Japan, it's always Kyoto. It's always the heart of Japan. It's always the shrines and the temples and everything else. And I'm kind of worried, y'all. I'm kind of worried things are just gonna bounce right back. Because here's the thing, is that what people may not realize, and this is the one thing that Kyoto, I know for a fact, is trying to push a little bit. Kyoto is not only the traditional heart of Japan, it is a massive center for religious practices. There are so many Shinto shrines, Buddhist temples, and just there are an insane amount of places of worship. This isn't a city to just go see a whole bunch of things. There's active centralized worship going on here with a multitude of religions, and to have this massive influx of people come in, you know, it's not just about taking unsolicited pictures of geisha or geiko or maiko anymore. This is the disturbance of people's faiths and beliefs. That worries me. In fact, to quote a New York Times article, and specifically Kyoto Mayor Daisaku Kodokawa, it isn't a tourist city, it's a city that values tourism. And there is a massive difference between those two things. Now, don't get me wrong. I know for a fact that Kyoto basically went bankrupt over the last couple of years because there was no tourism. Even domestic tourism couldn't really make up for that loss. I get that, but it's very likely that we could go back to the problems of 2019, and that's just gonna be another problem. Kyoto really is only one example of a big city in Japan that tourists are gonna go to, but it stands out as one that, in my opinion, has been the most affected by pre-COVID, the COVID lockdown, and post-COVID. I really think it's going to be massively affected by that. So I'm going to be keeping a really close eye on the going-ons of Kyoto, and I'm going to be paying very close attention to what my buddy Shogo, who actually lives in Kyoto, is going to have to say about it in the next 3 to 5 months. Lastly, the final thing that I want to talk about, and this may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people considering how we are right now post-COVID, but masks are possibly going to be a pretty big issue in Japan. Now, you don't have to go far to check out other YouTubers in Japan talking about, well, Japan's still wearing masks, are we going to be wearing masks forever? And the reason behind that, and I agree with them, is that people have been wearing masks for so long that they've gotten really comfortable with it, and nobody really wants to take it off because it's not even about COVID anymore. It's not even about like disease anymore. It's about making sure people are not made uncomfortable. This goes back to the system that I talked about probably 10 minutes ago in this video. People are not going to make that change very quickly and very easily because it's already been rooted in and established for such a long period of time now. And on the flip side, here in the US anyway, I don't see anyone ever wearing masks anymore. I will from time to time in really crowded areas. I know my wife still does everywhere we go. And when I do actually see people wearing masks, it's typically a lot of older Asian people. Now, I don't begrudge anyone a bit who wants to wear a mask. At this point, I don't really care. But Japan is going to care a lot. And I know there are gonna be a lot of people going in Japan with the expectation of, oh, Japan's back open again. I don't have to have a negative test. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. I don't have to prove anything. And people are not going to want to wear a mask. Especially when it comes to summertime. Summertime in 2023, I don't know how that's gonna go down. It is kind of torturous to have to wear a mask in the massive sweltering humidity of Japanese summer. So the best case scenario, if a foreign tourist isn't wearing a mask in Japan, is going to be there might be other Japanese people that might look at them funny, or maybe they harbor some very light resentment. The worst case scenario is people being rejected from restaurants, locations, events, things like that because they're not going to wear a mask. I hope that isn't a thing that ends up happening. I really don't want that to happen, but based on the attitudes that I've seen here in the US and the attitudes that I've seen in Japan, it's completely different. There may very well be a lot of culture clash in this. You're going to have Japan who are saying, this is our home, you follow our rules. Despite the fact that it's long been established that people don't have to wear masks outside anymore, and people still do. But it's that underlying, it's the system again. It's this underlying concept of public awareness and understanding and not creating inconvenience for anyone else. Where over here, it's the complete opposite. If we don't want to wear a mask, we're not going to, and a lot of people here don't want to wear them. So, sorry, I know I sound like I'm running around in circles with this, but I could see it becoming an issue. So yeah, with the whole mask thing, with the dual issue of a push for foreign travel and domestic travel, I'm really concerned that there's going to be a COVID bounce back, and we all know what that's gonna mean. There's gonna be a very, very decent chance that Kishida's gonna double back on this idea of opening Japan back up. I really hope it doesn't happen, but I could easily see it happening. If there is another big COVID spike, we're probably going to be the ones on the chopping block of who's to blame. And again, that's kind of why I'm waiting. But I will say this, I'm actually feeling a whole lot better about this whole circumstance than when I first started putting this video together, because yesterday I put a poll out on Twitter asking people, are you going to be rushing to Japan on October 11th? Are you going to give it some time? Are you just not interested in going in the first place? And like 80% of people said that they're going to hold off. They're going to wait and see what happens. And that again makes me feel a lot better about this idea of a much more gradual process of tourism going back into Japan. In fact, I kind of wonder how burnt people are with Japan. I mean, there wasn't that long ago a time when there was a huge backlash against Japan when it came to students, researchers, and other business people so incredibly upset that there were all these limitations about them being able to get into Japan that it kind of pushed them away from having any interest in the country in the first place. Whether it be students that had to wake up at 3 a.m. in order to have their Japanese class that was set in Japan, but they couldn't go to Japan, so why bother at that point, to people who were just outright refused entry under any circumstance. There was a huge amount of blowback in all of this, and I'm really starting to wonder how much this is going to affect October 11th. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when we saw dozens of headlines that looked like this. I mean, I myself had to shelve a lot of big going-ons and opportunities that I had potentially in Japan because of all this, and now, seeing October 11th, seeing everything open back up, I really don't know if those same opportunities are going to be there waiting for me anymore. And I hate to admit it, that's kind of put me off to Japan in a really big way. So really, there's absolutely no telling if there's going to be this big bum rush come post-October 11th when it comes to foreign tourism in Japan. While there are plenty of reasons that it's going to happen, there's plenty of other reasons why it probably won't. And I know that Japan really, really badly needs this tourism money. I know that they're pulling out all the stops to prepare for this big influx of foreign travel when it comes to post-October 11th. But I'm gonna be the overly cautious one here. Japan is going super hard and taking a big risk with all of this domestic and foreign tourism in such a short period of time, and I applaud them for making that kind of a bold move and having this risk that could give them really big reward. But I really do think this must be a gradual process. Not just due to the possibility of rampant COVID spreading, but also the potential nationwide shock of the general public. Seeing foreigners in mass again after 2 years, having to deal with them, having to be patient with them, there's going to be some conflict. And like I said, over-tourism was a big problem in Japan back in 2019, and it could be real easy to get back to those problems if there is a big influx of foreign travelers. So, should you go to Japan? Absolutely. While the government has been really stingy on this whole matter and created all of these problems with border control, it's the everyday people that have been suffering so badly, and yeah, I plan to dump a lot of money back into the Japanese economy as soon as I'm able to get back over. But that being said, I still think this really needs to be a gradual increase in tourism traffic, because without it, there can be a multitude of other problems that are going to be popping up which could create resentment and possibly renege this whole reopening in the first place. I remember seeing an article, and I'll pop it back up here if I can find it again, talking about how by spring and summer of 2023, that's when Japan's going to see the pre-pandemic numbers of income and tourism return, and I think that's the right amount of time. I think 3 to 5 months of slow, gradual reintegration of everyone to the concept of foreign tourism in Japan is probably the right amount of time. So honestly, do what you want, but I hope you can take what I have to say to heart a little bit and maybe give it a little bit of time. Maybe not rush immediately to Japan. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people out there who aren't going to pay attention to anything I say, and they're just going to go for it, and I understand. I sympathize with that. I want to get back as soon as possible, but I think it would be good for all parties involved to really think about what's going on and some of the potential disasters that can come of a big bum rush. So anyway, thank you for watching, everyone. I appreciate it so much. I got lots of videos that are going to be coming up this month. I'm also probably going to be dabbling in with some YouTube shorts. Be sure to check me out. Now, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday over on Twitch, we're going to have a grand old time with lots of build streams and a lot of new games that are going to be coming out that I probably need to be doing videos on. So anyway, one more time, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this is Gaijin Goombah signing out.